Thank you for joining me for part 2 of this series on Subnautica and mental health. In this episode, I want to talk to you about quests, memories, and solitude. We're all on a quest, whether it feels like it or not. Our worst days are part of the stories of our lives, the texture of our destinies. Though it feels like things have ended, that we've been beaten, defeated, this is really just temporary. Unfortunately, temporary can last a long time. Whether we ultimately stay in this place, which does happen to people, is up to us. Again, we may be in a situation not of our own making. You could have been betrayed by someone you trusted, or a sociopath decided to take a baseball bat to your life just because they could. Whatever happened, it's ultimately up to us to look out for ourselves. This is called self-reliance or resilience. There's actually a specific network for it in the brain, and it's designed to keep you alive. Key among the parts of this network is something called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Sitting just about half an inch behind your eye, the VMPFC helps you control executive functions, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, and decision-making. What's interesting about resilience is the more you tap into it, the stronger it gets. I mentioned in part 1 that the areas of your brain you use the most become dominant. There's also a way to train your VMPFC to become stronger. You can meditate. You can go for a kind of brain therapy called neurofeedback. And you can play games like Subnautica. Subnautica has the perfect mix of story, survival, decision-making, and exploration. Broken down into its base parts, the game is structured around micro goals. You explore, you gather materials, and then advance to larger, more complex goals. The approach is so simple, but so reflective of the circumstances of your own life. If you lost your job, for instance, then simply sitting around waiting for another one to magically pop out of thin air isn't going to help. Just like sitting around the life pod waiting for a rescue isn't going to do anything. You've got to take steps to get back out there, and by starting small, you can rebuild your confidence by accomplishing these micro goals. For instance, you could rework your resume, do some networking, and at least apply for one new job each day. The point I really want you to take home is that Subnautica taught me that even though I felt beaten, forgotten, lost, I could still do something to try and make things better. Furthermore, I didn't have a choice. I had to try, even if it was really difficult. It's the same circuitry in your brain. The ones you use to complete tasks in Subnautica are the same exact networks and neural pathways that you use to get stuff done in real life. We'll talk about this more in episode 3, but you need to know something important about your brain. It largely runs on autopilot. You have about 5% of conscious decision-making, and the rest is all automatic. You're a collection of habits, patterns, experiences, and routines. This is why you don't need to reteach yourself how to eat every day. You were born knowing how. The brain can be trained. Do something over and over and it becomes natural. Think of learning a musical instrument, learning how to read, drive a car. It eventually just becomes a program your brain runs, and your body does the rest without thinking about it. You consciously think to breathe? Of course you don't. Now here's where things get really interesting. Retraining the brain. I know because I've done it. And it wasn't just with games like Subnautica. I did it through books, through meditation, working with my therapist, and through something I mentioned earlier, neurofeedback. This is a therapy that focuses on teaching the brain to move towards homeostasis, i.e., regulation. When we have regulation, we're calm. We can handle situations as they arise and manage difficult emotions and situations. But what if your regulation has been undermined and you don't even realize it? What if you've been the victim of a violent crime or an accident? What if you were abused as a child? What if you were under the thumb of a toxic boss for years? This has more devastating consequences than we realize. And because we can't see or barely understand how our brain works, these changes can affect us without us being completely aware of them happening. And eventually, it just becomes our lives, and we're suffering, and we don't understand why. I used to think, well, life is hard, and sometimes bad things happen. We just have to soldier on. I know now that the traumas I suffered left deeper marks on me than I realized. When we're hurt deeply, psychologically, especially if we're children, we haven't built up the resilience that comes naturally with a good upbringing. We can be derailed, our calm wrecked on a neural level. Our brain, under constant stress, adapts to the pressure. Suddenly, threats are everywhere, even when they're not. You can't trust anyone. And there's a constant, slow-burning anxiety that's eating at you night and day. Relationships are difficult because once you've been betrayed, especially by a caretaker or a spouse, subconsciously, you're asking yourself, or probably more appropriately, telling yourself, it's only a matter of time before this person betrays me too. This can lead to a vicious cycle of self-fulfilling prophecies. Spend enough time in this state and you don't even know it's happening. The memory of the abuse, though, lives, literally lives, deep inside of your mind. You've pushed it down deep into your subconscious, but it's still there, down deep in the depths, waiting, swimming in the ocean of your mind, just waiting for its chance to come back to the surface. I'll relate a personal story to illustrate. I once had a job that I loved. I'd struggled long and hard to get it, but once I did, it finally felt like I'd arrived, that all the sacrifices I'd made had been worth it. It meant so much to me, just walking in the front door every morning. I'd endured poverty, rejection, and some pretty toxic workplaces to get someplace I genuinely was happy and proud to work at. Everything seemed fine. Then one day, about 7 a.m., the hiring agency I was contracted for called and told me not to go into work that day, that I'd been let go. No explanation, no warning, no nothing. I'd suddenly gone from working at a job that I loved and was good at to being cast out on the street. I later found this photo on my phone. I'd left my phone on my desk, and they took this picture when I got up to go to the bathroom. The guy taking the picture was my old boss. I can't say for sure why they did this. Maybe it was just a prank. I pored over my memory for months afterwards, trying to figure out if I'd done something wrong. It was maybe 1 or 2 times where there'd been a small disagreement, but I hadn't possibly imagined something like this, something this cruel could happen. I really liked them too, and I wish we could have talked about it and worked it out if there was a problem. Sometimes people just hurt you instead of talk, and you're left picking up the pieces. Now, I'm not telling you this story to put them on blast or anything like that. I'm genuinely sorry that whatever happened, we couldn't just work it out. I sincerely don't know what caused this, and I probably never will. If anything, I have more understanding now, after other experiences, why people do things like this, and all you can do is forgive them for not being a better version of themselves. I hope, wherever they are, they've made progress on their own journeys. It took a long time to heal from that. For days after, I'd wake up and my eyes would just fill with tears. I'd had my life ripped apart. I couldn't tell if it was my fault. I didn't know what I needed to fix. It didn't help either that a few weeks earlier my girlfriend had left me, but when it rains it pours, I guess. The point is, even though time passed, I was still upset. I've been deeply, deeply hurt when I know I didn't deserve it. I lost a job I loved, and it turned out the people I thought were my friends, they didn't like me at all. This caused neurological changes to my brain, trauma, and it would take a lot of time and effort to heal. That loss broke something inside of me. I didn't know anything about trauma at the time, but thankfully, when I did get another job at a better company, one where I was able to shine, I recovered. When we're traumatized, there are changes to our nervous system and our memory. We can relive, literally re-experience our memories as if they were happening in that very moment, over and over. Our body can't tell the difference. The part of our brain that controls fear, negative emotions, it has no concept of time. This is why depression can last for so long, because we're dragging ourselves around on a loop in our own minds that takes us back through the memory over and over again. This is a malfunction of our nervous systems due to the traumatic experience. And when we dwell on a bad memory, we sink ourselves deeper into the suffering. The brain in this state loses crucial neurotransmitters, the things that make our neurons fire. Things like dopamine and serotonin dry up. This is why, when we should be working the hardest to help ourselves, we can't seem to get off the couch. Now, my story didn't end there. I survived with a few scars. Fortune is a fickle thing, and that experience taught me that sometimes our lives are in someone else's hands. Sometimes we hold others in our hands. And when it's something under our power to control, we hold ourselves. It's ultimately up to us to try and do what's right, not satisfy ourselves somehow by inflicting pain or punishment on others. Not everybody knows this, though, and they can inflict terrible pain and suffering out of complete ignorance. I can't imagine what they did to me made them feel like good and upstanding human beings. Looking back, I can see how it was all part of my quest. Just another chapter in a story I wouldn't get all the pages to, but I could see the arc of the narrative playing out over time. It's finding where you are in the story and rolling with it, even the parts you don't understand. In the world of a game, this is much simpler. We implicitly know that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can, without fail, pick up the controller and start hacking away at the problem in front of us. But remember, this is crucial. The circuitry you use to play the game is the same exact circuitry you use to strive in your own life. And playing can make the circuitry stronger. Real life is a much more complicated version of this, but if we keep our eyes open and we try to meet ourselves where we really are in life, it's there, in that space. We can find some real answers and maybe some peace. Now, I know if you've been wronged like I was, how unfair this can all feel. It can feel like you've been forced on this quest when really all you wanted was to live your life in peace. The people who hurt you may not face any consequences for their actions, but you suffer in the wake of them. This is deeply unfair, and I recognize that. Your feelings are valid. You have every right to be mad at the person who hurt you. Nobody has the right to hurt you, but it's our responsibility, ultimately, to take care of ourselves. If we've been pushed into this place against our will, it's still up to us to do the necessary work to heal. Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. Victor Hugo. Memory is a funny thing. They're physical, very small, and they live inside what's called the hippocampus. Sometimes, something that happened years ago feels like it's happening right now. There are things you've forgotten that still live on, preserved like an amber, inside the deepest chambers of your mind. The past isn't really the past when you get hurt. You remember so that hopefully you don't get hurt again. Subnautica has its own way of exploring memory. It stretches across the oceans of cosmic time and reveals that in the grand scheme of things, we aren't much more than fiddler crabs picking over a sandbar, or schools of fish eternally being born, dying, and swimming the course nature has set out for us. It's poetic and worth zooming out to look at the big picture when you feel mired by a bad turn of fortune. The ruins of the alien civilization you find on the planet are as advanced as they are ancient. But for all their technology, their power, they couldn't save themselves from the inevitable march of time. They passed away, like all things do, and left a mystery behind. Not just of how they vanished, but what they'd hoped to achieve. You, as the player, come to this world with no memories of your own. You don't have a name, a past. You're essentially just yourself. This is subtle, but it makes the game a more personal experience. You are stranded on the planet. You need to find a way out. You need to do the work. The interesting thing about your memory is it records absolutely everything. Everything that ever happened to you is stored in your brain. The human brain is, in its own way, the biggest hard drive ever made. A lifetime of experiences is captured without you consciously choosing to remember. So when you play the game, even though it's simulated, you're creating new memories, and memory recall is a crucial part of how we regulate our emotions, plan for the future, and avoid danger. Subnautica will train your brain to be better at dealing with life, because the memories of the game will always live inside you. If you're struggling with dark memories, whatever it is that happened to you, take some solace in knowing that you remember in order to keep yourself alive. I know a lot of us would just prefer to forget, to have those memories erased. But those memories, they live on to protect us from those terrible things happening again. They have a crucial role to play should you ever be faced with these circumstances again. The poet Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters." What it means is, though you've been wounded, and it may have hurt you very badly, it's still a point where good things can enter your life. When I lost that job, I had to hang in there, but ultimately I did get a better job, and it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. I still have a lot of good friends there and a lot of happy memories. So memory can flow both ways. It can be the wound, and it can be the healing. The nature of memory is something we have to simply accept, and it's brilliantly captured in Rumi's words. Our wounds, our memories of the wounds, lead us to enlightenment, if we're wise enough to follow them. Now, I can understand how this doesn't quite make sense if whatever you're going through is happening right now. You're getting divorced. Company layoffs just hit. You've been diagnosed with cancer. Your child has died. The wound is with you right now. One day, the wound will be after. We have to do the work to process these memories and integrate them into our consciousness. Ignoring them is not going to fix the problem. It's only going to drag everything out. If we don't deal with them, the memories haunt us like ghosts, begging to be dealt with, terrifying us if we even try to get close. I can only speak from my own experience, but even though you're afraid, you have to face this darkness, because on the other side of it is the light. Trust me when I tell you, it's true. And it's going to hurt like hell. But it's the only way out. Not everybody makes it. People fall into addiction. People commit suicide. People stay stuck, depressed. there's no guarantee of a happy ending. This is perhaps the realest thing about Subnautica. You're literally the only survivor of a massive spaceship. All the other escape pods were lost. Nothing in life is guaranteed. One of the most startling things about what happened to me in the last year was realizing I wasn't bulletproof. I wasn't somehow immune to the winds of fortune. No matter how hard I had worked in my career to get where I was, no matter how successful I was in relationships, I still had this vulnerability that caused everything to collapse. And suddenly, I was alone with myself. Being alone and being lonely are two very different things. If your life right now or at a point in the past has been rocked to its very foundations, then you are alone. What happened to you didn't happen to anyone else, so no one will really understand. In this solitude, the work can begin. I'll be very specific about what I mean by the work in another episode, but for now, I'll tie it to one very important word: action. You have to take action. Say the word to yourself over and over and over again until you get up and you go do something. Action, 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 action. You just have to start, no matter what it is. Just start. If it's rearranging the cans in your cupboard, just do it. Start something and then finish it. In Subnautica, we are alone. No one is coming to save us, so we'll have to do it. The same is true in life. It's when things are stripped away, our life is turned upside down, and we're clinging to the rocks to not be swept away, that it's crucial to remember that we can still choose. Maybe not choose well when our emotions are running high, but we can still choose. And we have to choose to help ourselves. As you play the game, you'll find yourself very willing to accept what you have to do. I need this component? Fine, I'll get it. I have to go here? Fine, I'll go. Without waypoints to guide you, a risky but worthwhile choice by the developers, we'll need to learn and grow into our surroundings. And we'll do it all on our own. In solitude, we can spend time with ourselves. The truth is, you can be a real friend to yourself in this place. A year ago, I didn't have anyone to turn to. I had friends who offered their sympathies, but nobody really understood what a crushing blow my life had taken. At my lowest, it felt like everything was over, that I may as well sink into the earth. Your character in the game doesn't stop and reflect very much. There's no cutscenes, personal sides. Our emotions are our own throughout the game, and it's mostly a doing game rather than a feeling one. But we can still borrow that get stuff done mentality and apply it to our mental health. It takes a bit of work to realize that helping yourself is as rewarding as working a job. But we can get there. When you're in this place of solitude, there's time to reflect. This reflection is work. It's very likely this event has caught you off guard and brought up from the depths of your past things that you've left unresolved. Maybe you had a good reason to. You were building your career, you were trying to keep your marriage going, you were laboring under a psychotic boss who took pleasure in tormenting you. But now that you're away from all that, it's just you and yourself, and it's time to do the work. This is a rare moment. Some people aren't pushed down so low that they meet the mirror in the depths of their soul and look into the reflection. But maybe you have if you're listening to this. And as hard as it is to believe, it can be a gift. Your old life has been obliterated. There's nothing connecting you to it anymore. You are now in the realm of solitude. In that place, you can ask yourself, without the risk of being distracted, who am I? What am I? How the hell did I get here? Marooned on an alien planet isn't so far off from being separated from everything that gave you meaning in your real life. A job, status that came with it, a relationship, the security you got from a person you could count on. Removing it is painful, no question. Much of that pain can be injustice if you were wrong. But it can also be facing down what we either chose not to see or couldn't. Our regrets, our own misdeeds, our painful memories that we've tried to forget. But if we just take that first step, just like that first step outside of the life pod and into the water, we can start swimming. We can start building. We can start searching. It's all possible. Difficult. Sometimes very difficult, but possible. Thank you for coming back for part 2. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll talk about the work, the subconscious, and overcoming the adversaries in our lives, among other things. If you found this video helpful, let me know, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as those things are a huge help and it will encourage me to make more videos. Until next time, game on.